Hi, welcome back. In this technical preparation lecture, we will touch base upon certain technical concepts of your software engineering, which you should be preparing before appearing for the technical rounds. So let us move on. So the first important thing that the technical recruiter is going to focus on is your academic project or your internship. So he's going to take a look at your resume. He'll obviously see the skills that you have mentioned in the resume. But the first question that he might start up is by asking what was your academic project, or tell me about your academic project or the internship that you did in the last 6 months. So when this question comes to you, you should be thoroughly prepared to take on any additional questions around this particular topic. For example, be ready to draw and explain the design diagram. So let's say you did an internship or your academic project was pretty complex. So he's going to ask you to draw the architecture of that particular software product or the module that you guys developed, and then he's also going to ask you the inputs and outputs of that particular design diagram. So you should be in a position to explain that. Next, I would seriously suggest mug up all the technical details of the project. You don't want to be stammering when you are actually explaining your project. Next, what was the role in your team? Let's say you did internship in a software organization. So what was your role? Let's say you were doing an academic project in a team of 2 to 3 people. What was your role? You were a developer, a designer, or you had a mixed role of a designer and a developer and a tester. So clearly come up with your role in the interview. What modules you used? Let's say you did your project or your internship project in Python or Java or C++. So what all technical modules were involved in that particular implementation that you should clearly highlight in response to the answer to this question? And expect more questions when you mention that I use the TCP module, or I use the graphics module. He's for sure going to come back and ask in detail about those modules. So you should prepare that the usage of that module in and out. Explain the algorithm. So certain projects or certain software implementations are very algorithm based. So if that is the case with your project or your internship project, you should prepare thoroughly the algorithm and the cases around it. Next, now at the end, he might also ask, like, okay, fine, you did this particular software implementation, but what is the limitation of this overall project? Or what else you could have done to make it better? You should have an answer ready for that. Okay, now we discussed this in the previous lectures also. List only those skills that you can answer questions on your resume, because when he's sitting in front of you, he has your resume in your hand, in his hand, and he's taking a look. Hey, this guy knows C, or this guy knows Python, or he's very good at Selenium or API testing. So he's going to shoot questions on these skill sets. So I just wanted to touch base again on that particular topic, which we covered in the last lecture. That list only those skills which you can handle questions for. Now, it is very common to ask, write a code in the interview nowadays. Let it be a software developer role or a software tester role. For sure, you are going to be asked to write code. If the interview is face to face, or then he might give his laptop to you and ask you to code. In that case, you will have to start coding in any editor that he has on his laptop. If the interview is on Zoom or Skype, and if you are sharing your screen, then make sure that you always have your editor also ready. Now, it could happen that certain interviewers, they ask you to write the code in Notepad, but feel free to ask the interviewer that, hey, can I use Eclipse? If you're working on Python and then you want to use PyCharm, ask for permission first that can I use PyCharm or can I use Eclipse for this particular code? If he says yes, fine, go ahead and use it. Else, ask him which editor you can use. Next, use comments in your code. So if you're writing a piece of code which is very complex, then make sure you put in comments there. Don't put comment for every line of the code. Comments are to be used where the code is complex, or if someone else is looking at the code, that comment should help him to understand that particular logic. That's where comments come into picture. Use proper naming standards for variables and methods. Do not use A, B, C, X, Y, Z as variable names. Give them some proper meaningful names in your code, so that the interviewer is really impressed that with all your commenting and the naming standards that you have followed, he really sees that you are a very good programmer. Now, this was about writing code and the skills that you should prepare. and about your resume. Moving on to the next slide. The preparation does not stop on the first slide. The preparation still continues. Now, let's say you're appearing for a product organization. We discussed that in case of a product organization, the difficulty level of interviews is going to be really high. So you can expect data structures. So you need to prepare all lists, trees, stack, queues, binary trees. You should also know how to implement them using your code. And then he's obviously going to ask you about the time complexity of the program that you have implemented. So you should be aware of the time complexity concepts and how you can reduce the complexity of the code that you have written. Then, if you are appearing for a product or service-based organization, puzzles is a very common thing. The puzzle complexity of the puzzle also depends upon what round of the interview you are. Like first round interview, the puzzle might be easy. If you are appearing for a technical higher manager role, then the complexity of the puzzles might be very high. But make sure you go through the puzzles on the internet, or there are a lot of puzzle books, logical puzzle books. Make sure you solve them, practice them before you appear for the interview. The next thing, focus to solve logical programming problems. And this is applicable to QA roles also. One thing the interviewer is for sure is that he wants to understand whether you can solve the logical problems. Now, what does that mean? For example, he will ask you program that needs you to use two for loops. For example, binary sorting. You need two for loops there. So if you are really able to implement two for loops, he thinks you can think logically well. Again, recursions. Let's say the Fibonacci series. You might implement it without the recursion or with recursion, but sometimes some interviewers ask you to convert the code that you have written into a recursion. Can you use a recursion here so that the number of lines of code can be reduced? Then printing. It's a very common scenario to ask for pattern printing in the interviews. Like for example, hey, I want the output to be something like this: one star on the first line, 2 stars on the second line, 3 stars on the third line, 4 stars on the fourth line. So this is called as pattern printing. So he might give you a pattern like, let's say, a triangle pattern or a square pattern or any pattern that he has in his mind, and he'll ask you to write a code which will print, whose output will be similar to the pattern in the question. Then string operations without built-in methods. So most of the time during the interviews, the interviewers will refrain or restrict you from asking to use the built-in methods. For example, let's consider this string a program. He says there is an input string and the output should be the reverse of that particular string. Now there are built-in methods in almost every programming language to reverse the string, but the focus is not that. He wants to understand whether you can reverse the string without using built-in methods. So in C language, you'll have to actually parse the string and then maybe use stack or an array to maintain that string and then print it in the reverse order. Same in the case of Python also, it's very easy to reverse the string using built-in methods, but how do you do it without using built-in methods is where your actual skill sets are shown to the interviewer. The next, list operations, map operations, dictionary operations, especially in case of Python, dictionary operations, and a lot of programming questions around dictionaries and lists you can expect. So make sure when you prepare, you cover these data types in your preparation. Next, moving on, mathematical problems. So what I mean by this, so for example, you might be given, let's say the interviewer says that the input is a decimal number and I want to print the binary output of this number. So that's a mathematical problem. So, or it could be reverse way. I have a binary input and I want to print the decimal number of that binary input. You need to understand these mathematical concepts also. Especially, I would say, do prepare around binary operations, or how do you convert binary to decimal, decimal to binary. The next thing is regular expressions. Now, this thing is really good to have, but I'm pretty sure not everybody goes well with regular expressions. What is a regular expression? What are the different expression operators that are available? But in case of Python, I think Python or Java, if you have a bit of exposure, that is definitely going to help you. Then file operations. This is again one of the most common interview questions. Like maybe they'll ask you to read something from the file and then create a new file with specific characters omitted or specific words omitted. A different kind of file operations, like there is an existing file and you want to append something. So all these file operations based on the programming language, sometimes it can be really tricky, sometimes it can be very easy. So these are the things you should really focus on. Bare minimum things I think you should focus on in your technical interview preparation. Moving on, what else he can ask? What else you can expect in the interview uh, apart from technical questions? Now, some of the interviewers like to understand that when you do your graduation, how good you have completed your graduation. So he's in a mood to check, like, are you really good with the basic concepts? For example, Unix commands. So most of you have Unix in your curriculum, your academic curriculum. So do you really know Unix basic commands, top command, ls command, the like IP address? How do you check IP address of the Unix machine? How do you copy files? And how do you find files of a specific size using the find command, the grep command? So make sure you at least brush up your Unix commands. Then the second thing is the database queries and concepts. So database is also a part of the academic curriculum almost everywhere in the world. So basic insert operations, difference between the primary key and a foreign key, uh, different types of joins, inner join, outer join, what is the difference? You yourself should be able to take an example, let's say an employee table, having a join with a department table, practice it at home before going for the interview. How will the join query look like? Moving on to the next, the networking concepts. Again, a very prominent topic in your academic, throughout your academic. What's an IP address? What are the category classes of IP addresses? TCP model versus OSI model. What's the difference between TCP and UDP protocols? These are basic things I think which is expected from any software graduate. Then operating system concepts. What's paging? What is swapping? The LIFO and FIFO algorithms. You should brush again if you really are not able to recall these concepts before you appear for the interview. And at the end, lastly, I wanted to you to request is that go to HackerRank, sign up, and practice as many coding examples you can there. So start from the beginner level, then go to the intermediate level, and daily at least try to solve 2 programs on HackerRank. It is going to improve your logical reasoning skill, and you will yourself feel that you are very good at getting very good at solving complex logical programs, and that is definitely going to help you during the coding round. So that's it for this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.